Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Today is August 18th, 2020. It's 11:30 a.m. Purpose of today's meeting is a joint session with the Budget Advisory Board and City Commission of the City of Fort Lauderdale. This will be a Zoom meeting, but before I begin, and before I read comments that I must read from the beginning of our meeting, I want to just take this moment for all of you who are watching this program to remind you to do two things today if possible. One is make sure you vote. Today is the last day to vote in the primary and judicial races. Voting is until 7 p.m. tonight. Please try to find your voting precinct on your voter registration card. Make sure you show up at your precinct if you haven't already voted with ID. I believe they ask for a driver's license. And also, if you have not yet had yourself counted with the census, please be sure. What is the I forget the website? It's My Census 2020. Okay, I'll repeat it during the workshop and through the course of the day. You know, this is a great opportunity for everybody to understand how important it is that we be counted. Federal funding, all kinds of resources that we rely on as a city, as a community, dependent on the amount of people that we are able to draw from and to be recognized by the federal government and state government. So the higher the number, the better for us. So it's really important that you go to the census website, count yourself, count your family, make sure when you go to work. Okay, close. My2020census.gov. My2020census, CENSUS.gov. And if you are at work right now or plan to be later in today, ask your fellow co-workers, take 10 minutes out, go on your computer and be counted. It's really, really important. We cannot neglect this, and time is running short, by which the deadline will be upon us before they cut off the count. So having said that, let me begin this morning's workshop. The City of Fort Lauderdale will be hosting its meetings in a virtual format until further notice. The public can listen to and view virtual meetings at fortlauderdale.gov, that's FORT, lauderdale.gov/FLTV, and on youtube.com/City of Fort Lauderdale, all spelled out. youtube.com City of Fort Lauderdale, as well as on Comcast Channel 78 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. For those who want to speak on an agenda item and have not already signed up to do so, please visit www.fortlauderdale.gov/V as in Victor, C meetings to sign up. To help ensure the same decorum as in our in-person meetings, we ask that you please abide by the following guidelines. Please, number one, please refrain from any behavior that is disruptive, distractive, profane, or inhibits the meeting in any way. Two, while you are on the phone waiting for your opportunity to speak, please mute the meeting broadcast on FLTV, YouTube, Comcast, or AT&T if watching simultaneously to avoid delays with the broadcast. I, Dean Trantellis, will call upon you when it is your turn to speak and also notify you when your time has expired. City staff has automatically added speakers in to the listen-only mode, and you will be unmuted to speak when recognized. 3, once you have completed speaking, you will be muted and may either hang up to exit the meeting or stay connected to listen to the remainder of the meeting. 4, the fashion police will be watching to make sure you're appropriately attired. No, that was my addition, sorry. Anyway, we can now proceed, and I welcome everybody to the workshop with the Budget Advisory Board. I want to take a moment and thank all the members of the Budget Advisory Board for their tireless effort to try to help us compile the necessary components in order to ensure that we have a balanced budget, one which we do not have to dip into enterprise funds. We're actually using the money that was intended from the various sources of income that we generate. If you look to your agenda items, we have business 1, business 2, and business 3. And starting with business 1, business updates presented by Brian Donaldson, who is chair of the Budget Advisory Board. Brian, are you with us?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick question. Was the clerk going to do a roll call, or do we not need that?
Well, I think the clerk should do a roll call. Mr. Clerk, can you do a roll call?
Starting with the commission, Commissioner Moritas.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glassman.
Here.
Commissioner McKenzie.
He told me yesterday he would be at this meeting, but might be a little busy.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Here.
Mayor Trentalis.
Here.
And for the Budget Advisory Board, Chair Brian Donaldson.
Here.
Vice Chair Johnny Smith.
Here.
Jeff Lowe.
Here.
Ross Camerata.
Here.
Christopher Williams.
Present.
Michael Marshall.
I'm here.
Adam Sabin.
Here.
Robert McGrath. We'll come back to Mr. McGrath.
I can see him visually.
Yeah. Prabowling Patel
Here.
and John Zanos. Not present. So I think, Mr. McGrath, we're trying to get him on with the volume.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay,
Okay, great. So we have a quorum.
yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Brian, for reminding me to do that. And now you may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you all the commissioners, and a thank you to the rest of my fellow BAB members. 9 of us are online today, and as a team, we partnered with the city staff over the past year in preparing this year's budget. Today, because I know that you have a marathon session, there's a lot of people signed up to speak at your 6 p.m. Commission meeting. I really want to focus this only on various items that I think are important over being respectful of your time. So today what we're going to do is, the purpose of the meeting is to give some highlights. We just met jointly via virtual last June. So if there were things that were discussed in June that need a follow-up, I'll mention those today. But otherwise, there are things that have not changed, so there's no need to go back to those. So today I want to start off by going over the commission goals, and then I'm going to discuss the general fund and discussions that we had pertaining to that, that various BAB members had concerns, and how we came to a conclusion on those. And then I'll finalize with the other funds aside from general fund, before we turn it over to the city auditor for his report. So in looking at this commission and how this commission varied from previous commissions, you met in January of each year and set your commission priorities. We as BAB wanted to make sure that in partnership with the city manager and staff, that the budgets aligned with your commission goals. So I wanted to touch upon a few of the things that were part of your commission goals. You as a commission, as a new commission, when you started on, wanted to address the needs of infrastructure. I am pleased to reiterate that the city manager and team eliminated the practice of ROI in this year's fiscal year of 2020, and the proposed budget for 2021 that we're reviewing today, the ROI for the Water Sewer Fund is completely eliminated. So that $20 million that used to shift from the Sewer and Water Fund into the general fund has been fully eliminated. And I just wanted to put out onto the public record today that that has been accomplished. It was accomplished in the fiscal year currently and will continue to go forward. Well done by everyone. Thank you. The stormwater, yesterday I participated in the District 2 pre-agenda meetings, and there was a lot of conversation from taxpayers bringing up the trim notice and the stormwater that was showing up on the trim notice. So I just wanted to take a moment to help explain what that is. The stormwater, you will see on the city websites, has a list of hearings that it will be going, so the public can participate in that. But just in a nutshell, the Stormwater Fund is going to be funding new projects in the 2021-2025 budgets, which had not been funded prior. So with this new stormwater number that is coming into the 2021 budget, that money can be used toward infrastructure projects such as seawalls, different drainage, et cetera. So that is the first time that these additional projects that have been identified, which supports the commission goals of infrastructure, that is not water sewer infrastructure, it is stormwater infrastructure. And that will be funded through this new bond. It's been taken off of the utility bill, which single family homes used to see that on their monthly water, sewer, garbage, stormwater, everything bill. And it is now being moved over to the stormwater fund on the trim notice, which will be collected at the, through the property taxes, which do get paid. Whereas we've always had a shortfall of $3 to $4 million in non-paid water sewer bills, which we need to address on a different conversation. But this will actually be collected, and we're moving forward for the first time with a very intense infrastructure for stormwater projects, which I think is a big, big plus. The next thing was the water sewer fund. And the fact that you've that city staff has taken the direction of you as a commission of phasing out ROI and done that successfully. We're being able to move forward with the different water and sewer fund projects, along with the additional repairs and the aggressive timeline with the large main line that is going down to the port. So those projects seem to be on target. The one thing that I wanted to mention and to bring up in regards to the water sewer fund is the 5-ash. In this budget, there is, I believe, over $65 million that is being moved into repairs to make sure that that facility continues to provide the citizens of the city adequate water and with the purity that we are currently having. But in the budget for the 2021, there is a new item, which is for the manager, I'm sorry, the proper thing is an owner manager, and that will be is in the budget for 2021. So we are moving forward with the need for acknowledging that the 5-ash needs to be replaced. By passing this budget, we will have an owner rep and start moving down that path, whether that becomes an unsolicited private partnership or what it entails will be further discussed, but we need to be moving down to the road of replacing 5-ash. And what that means is that we are going to have to be looking at the water sewer rates, and those are going to have to go up in 2022. At probably 9% a year for the next 3 years versus a large 30% in 1 year. So I'm just putting that out there that 5-ash does need to be replaced. We have put into the new budget the owner rep to get that started, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone is in agreement that we're moving forward with the need to replace 5-ash, to make sure that that falls into your commission goals of infrastructure. Another commission goal that you had was a waterway quality. And we're making progress in that as well as a city. And I sent a proposal to each of you that I had worked with Susie Bailey, who is the president of Nurmi Isles. And we currently don't have in the budget a budget for doing regular testing. We've been doing testing that is required by the county and by the state, and especially after we've had some disasters. But I think we need to put into the budget a number of possibly $100,000 a year to make sure that we as a city are testing our waterways, especially in areas where we have a lot of recreation use, like George English Park, the Lake Sylvia, the sandbars, et cetera. And I think that we need to be doing that on a testing basis. And I just wanted to open it up if there was any discussion in what your thoughts were of the city doing a more regular testing.
Well, Brian, this is Dean.
Yeah.
What are you telling us as far as the county or state required testing? What frequency do they impose and what frequency are you recommending?
I believe that I can turn that over to staff to answer better what the county is requiring us to do now, because I don't want to misstate that. But I was suggesting that in areas which have a high frequency of recreation use, that we need to do this on a weekly basis so that we can better identify if there is fecal matter, for example, in some of these areas. One of your items, which is in the budget, is replacing and doing repairs to the pump stations for the boats to be able to discharge, but is that being used, et cetera. So I think we need to be doing a weekly, especially in areas where we know that we have recreation use, where we have paddle boarders, we have people swimming, et cetera. I acknowledge that we get a lot of pollutants coming from the west, because obviously all those streams and canals come east to discharge out into the ocean. And after major rainstorms, we know that we always have more pollutants that would be throwing off tests. But I think that we need to, as a very positive thing for the city, that we need to be saying, you know, we need to do a weekly in order to make sure that where we know we are using recreation. And that's not just in one district, it needs to be throughout the city. So that's my feelings, but.
Staff have is anyone from Public Works here to respond to
Sure. Yeah.
the question?
Mayor, we've got Raj, Dr. Gaspin, both on the line here. I can see quickly. We'll see if either one of those staff members want to start with a report or start with a response, and I'll take it.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Keep going.
this is Raj, Public Works Director. The county does the monitoring every 3 months, and we are required as a part of our stormwater permit to do some monitoring as well. But I do not believe that we do a monitoring like every week or once every month. We are considering increasing the frequency of monitoring, but we have not decided quite on the frequency itself. We want to increase that one than what the county is doing every 3 months, but we are still evaluating, and we will be doing that in coordination with both the county and FDEP. And for any additional details, I believe that Nancy Gassman is on the line, so she'll be happy to answer any additional questions any may have.
We'll go ahead and let Nancy weigh in, and then
Okay.
I'll see if I have any comments. Dr. Gaspin.
Nancy, are you on the line, please?
I am on the line. I'm available. You said if there were any additional questions.
So Dr. Gassman, the neighbor request is more frequent testing rather than 4 times a year. What are your feelings regarding testing, and how can we improve the frequency?
I think that one of the concerns that I have with the proposal that we've received from Miami Waterkeepers is that this is water quality testing that is limited to our city, and that other cities that surround us are not being solicited to provide the same level of additional testing for bacteria. And my concern there is that we will be creating a false sense of understanding the water quality in our area and possibly driving economic and tourists out of our city because we have a testing network, and a testing network does not exist in the adjacent cities. I think that if this type of a water quality network would be established, it would make more sense for all of Broward County's recreational waters to be included in the greater frequency of testing. And that way it would provide a more complete picture of our recreational waterways for the tourists that come into the region and for the users within the city of Fort Lauderdale.
So you're saying that because these other cities have tributaries that come into our city, if we found evidence of pollutants in our water, they may not be sourced from Fort Lauderdale. It may come from another city. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
That's part of the issue, but another part of the issue is that we may see after a rainfall event an excursion outside of the standards, and because we have a testing network and, for example, Pompano does not, that someone will say, oh, there's not good water quality in Fort Lauderdale today. I looked at the results. I'm going to go swimming or paddleboarding in Pompano. And what they end up doing is they go from an area of known risk to an area of unknown water quality and unknown risk. And so without having a level playing field of water quality monitoring throughout the intercoastal waterway that includes the coastal communities to our north and to our south, we may be creating an issue for the city in terms of a false perception of what the water quality is in the city without that having that equivalent overview for the cities to our north and to our south.
I guess,
Mayor?
yes, go ahead, Stephen.
No, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Gassman. I really appreciate your report, and I've read the entire PowerPoint, and I understand everything you're saying, but at this point in time, I would rather us be a leader, and that might mean trying to get other cities to understand that for not too much money, they can join us in this effort. I think that we would always be able to qualify whatever the results were with exactly what you're saying, if it was due to a rain event or something else. But I think that the more frequent testing might actually help us pinpoint certain areas that need some remediation, but it will also pinpoint where we're doing well. So I don't know, for me, $100,000 for a whole year to have someone like Miami Waterkeepers or someone else like that. And I know that we have a lot of people that are very eager to help us in this effort in terms of working with groups. I still look at this as wanting to have us be a leader to make sure that folks are aware of what we're doing in this regard, as opposed to just saying why we cannot do it.
Well, Commissioner, where did you get the $100,000 figure from?
Well, the report that Brian and Susie put together, they emailed us. I'm going to go back to my email. It looks like
so if I recall the report, they talk about testing every 2 weeks.
Every week.
It was every week at 10 positions throughout the city, so that we would make sure that we took 3 different districts and that we were representative. So for example, in Harbor Beach, where all the boats congregate on the weekends and they're going into the water, I believe it's called Lake Sylvia. Is that it? That really doesn't have runoff from the west. And is the water quality good there? And if not, maybe some boats aren't necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing. If it's at the sandbar, if it's at George English Park, why can't that middle river be more controlled than some of the main rivers downtown that come from Plantation, et cetera? So it was a start. I think it's a bad thing not to have any money in the budget for any kind of a more reasonable testing that the city is doing. And I think that we should be a leader, as the commissioner said, but I'd love to hear some more commissioners comment.
I think it makes a lot of sense because we are on everyone's line of sight right now for water quality. Everyone is looking to Fort Lauderdale because of the sewer breakage we had. And I think that it behooves us to be very proactive, as Commissioner Glassman said, and be a leader. And maybe in conversations that I have with mayors of our adjacent cities, I can have that conversation to talk to them about doing testing, more frequent testing than they're currently doing, as Dr. Gassman suggested. So I think that I think it makes a lot of sense. I think our community would have a higher comfort level knowing that knowing one way or the other. You know, if we have contaminated water for whatever reason, then we need to alert the community. If we don't, then we need to let everyone know that the water is safe to enjoy recreational activities. So I, for one, would be in favor of that. I understand it's about $100,000, and I think it's something we can afford under the circumstances.
We certainly would be willing to add that to the budget.
And Mayor, I also wanted to thank Dr. Gassman. I thought that the report on the removal of debris from the waterway and the mitigation efforts that we did and what we saved not going into our waterways with the canal cleanings and the amount of disposal of tonnage and all the catch basin issues. And I thought that report was excellent as well. All of the street sweeping, the amount of debris that was actually prevented from going into our waterways. So I just wanted to say thank you for that report as well, because that also went a long way in improving the quality of our water. So thank you.
And I'm at some point, Commissioner, I'm gonna. What's the matter? Oh, I'm looking there and I should be looking here. Okay.
He was answering my question. Sorry.
At some point, Commissioner, I'm going to bring up for the commission to consider rules regarding leaf blowers. I see so many of these contractors who are blowing debris into the sewer system. And I'm wondering whether, I'd like you to think about it, but I'm wondering whether we might consider outlawing leaf blowers and only allowing leaf vacuum devices so that doesn't enter our waterways. It doesn't add nutrients to the waterways that we've been so plagued with, and something for us to consider down the road as we're looking to improve our water quality. Anyway,
yes, I agree. I've also had those conversations already with our city attorney about how we could start working in that direction. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I please add one thing, sir?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to assure the commission and the members of the community and the BAB members that we are going to be looking very closely at our stormwater management program, and we definitely have plans to expand both to meet the intent of our permit requirements and also to improve the water quality in our waterways. So we will be working on expanding that program in conjunction both with Broward County and FDEP. So regardless of what happens, we will continue to enhance our efforts towards the stormwater management.
Great. Thank you so much, Raj. Okay, Brian, you please continue.
Okay. The next thing,
Heather,
and is a
sorry,
follow-up.
Mr. Mayor and Brian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heather, were you trying to say something, Heather? It looked like.
Well, I'm just thinking that this is $100,000 is definitely not going to solve this problem. It might identify some issues, but when I think about water, I think about our whole state. I think, you know, I said the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. What about South Florida Water Management? I mean, we're so interconnected. Just to say that the city of Fort Lauderdale is going to start testing, you know, that might expose some issues, but it's a long way from solving the problem of mitigation in our area. And then does this go to beaches too? Or, you know, I know the state tests the beaches, the county tests the waterways. I really think, you know, this needs to have a lot of leadership from the county. I'm, you know, okay with the city of Fort Lauderdale doing this, but to to say we're going to continue this in isolation. I think we really need to have a bigger push of doing this countywide and having that county conversation and then getting the state dollars, you know, or federal dollars, however the money flows, into fixing water in general. I mean, I know there was a big water project that the state had, you know, in the Everglades and Okeechobee and everything. So I kind of want to know a little bit more, what are we from that level, as opposed to just the City of Fort Lauderdale is just going to test our waterway, and what do we do? So I'm just not comfortable. I know this is just a budget conversation, so I get the $100,000 placeholder, but I think this needs much bigger conference conversation. And I know Raj and everyone will get back to us, but I don't want to just highlight the City of Fort Lauderdale, because I know we did a lot of mitigation after our sewer break. So that's a separate issue. I think the big problem is this non-point source discharge that naturally occurs, whether it's based on, you know, the rain and the pesticides, the fertilizer, the animals that are already in our water. So, you know, I'm okay with testing. I just don't like I don't like the news article that I'm going to see. You know, Fort Lauderdale is what, you know, it's just, what do we do? So I almost think we're doing this backwards. I'd almost prefer getting something going a little bit more state, county, you know, and then, you know, Fort Lauderdale. But I guess I'm happy to do it. I don't know. The process is a little, I'm not too comfortable.
Well, Commissioner, I think Raj indicated that he was going to make overtures to the county to try to enhance their testing frequency and methodologies. But are you saying that if the county or the state don't want to get involved, that we shouldn't do it?
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I almost just think the county's already testing it, right? So the county already.
Times a year, 4 times a year.
Only quarterly.
But my concern would be more the mitigation effort, really. What are we doing? Why don't we have laws? Like you're bringing up leaf blowers. Then why don't we have a county-wide ordinance about, you know, putting garbage or leaf lawn clippings in our stormwater system? You know, I just think this needs to, like I said, we're so interconnected. I get a little concerned about just taking this on in a vacuum. I think this is much bigger, from, like I said, Lake Okeechobee all the way down to the county, these counties. So I hope if we're doing this testing, I don't want the news story to be Fort Lauderdale fails, you know, 25 test sites, you know, every 2 weeks.
Well,
I want it to be, you know,
Well,
I want it to be like,
Commissioner,
what's,
maybe you could be our voice on the county commission. So maybe next time you could run for county commission and be Fort Lauderdale's representative.
okay.
But,
I'm happy to work with Lamar. I like my county.
Mayor,
Oh,
Commissioner-
hi, Commissioner.
I concur with Commissioner Moritas. I'd rather see mitigation than just arbitrarily jumping out saying we're doing more testing, and we're still coming up with the same results. And I had an in-depth conversation with staff, got a real understanding of what we're doing. And again, if the debris and the runoffs are coming from the west, just because we're testing, and doesn't mean we're going to get a handle on it. Just means we're going to be able to say, hey, it's higher today. I'd rather see some type of mitigation we can do, or have the county take the lead on it. And my question to staff would be, if these points of entries are coming from the west, what rivers are those? What rivers would they be coming from the west?
The Middle River and the North and South Fork of the New River are the primary tributaries that come into the Intercoastal Waterway for the City of Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, I mean, so maybe we concentrate on that, since those are the two entry points that come to our waterways, and just not arbitrarily start testing more right now. That's my comment.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Commissioner Sorensen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks. I think, you know, more testing is a good thing, but when we're dealing with non-point source, you got to have a really comprehensive way to how can you determine whether it's just dumped from a boat that's just transiting or so forth. So we got to have a robust mitigation plan to address it. And some of this is very tough to actually pinpoint what actually caused it. So I think we got to keep driving towards the solution, and I'm confident staff can provide some opportunities for that. Thank you.
Okay, so in summary, could I ask whether or not, obviously this was a first proposal. My concern is when we're looking at the budget, and I'm going to shift it back to budget, that if we don't put a place card in for testing of some type that is driven by the city to be able to help move forward your commission initiatives of showing that you're concerned about water quality, and being able to, how do we do mitigation if we don't know that there's an issue? So have a whole different discussion about how to implement it, where, et cetera. But is there enough interest to have the city manager put something into the budget for some type of a city water testing is what I'm asking.
Yes.
So I'm interested in that, but just for clarity, from my perspective, we can't have a testing plan without a mitigation plan.
Absolutely. I'm not asking
right,
that.
Brian?
But mitigation is, part of the mitigation is going to be what we're going to be doing with the stormwater. So if we understand, we've got a $200 billion bond that is now going to be looking at projects between 2021 and 2025. How do we, we think we know where we should be putting all that money, but maybe we should be doing some type of testing that's not done by the county and only once a quarter to help identify, do we maybe need more filters at the end of the stormwater runs? Do we need, how much more money should we be putting into a public boat dump, type of situation? So that was my concern, is that we are not planning on doing any testing. And if we continue to ignore the situation and never test and always point to state, county, well, they aren't testing, we aren't coming across as leaders as a city. And I don't think it's moving forward your water quality initiative that you have as a commission. And that's just my opinion.
Let me just say that, the amount of money that's being sought here is a fraction of what mitigation costs would be. And obviously you can't mitigate until you know what the problem is. So you need to test to see where the problem is and what type of problem we have. So as a placeholder, I think there's a majority of people that I've been hearing, the commissioners now seem to think that let's put a placeholder amount in there so that we can decide when we start to do the budget whether or not that is something that the majority of the commission wants to have. But mitigation is going to cost millions, and this is where we're talking about $100,000. And so let's move forward. And let's just hear the rest of what you have to say.
All right. Then I wanted to shift now into if there were no other questions in regards to your commission goals, then I would like to move into discussion on general fund. And some of the points that we had a lot of discussion as BAB. So one of the discussion points was the proposal that the city manager had put in the negotiating the elimination of the cost of living, which was 1.5%, which would be saving us $2.3 million. My understand, we had a lot of conversation with that, and my understanding from the city manager is that the bargaining units are reevaluating how they want to go alter that. It may not be COLA, but it may be other items that would add up to that fiscal number. So it's really, for this budget that we're talking about today, it looks like there will be a $2.3 million savings on that. The next item that had discussion from BAB was originally the city manager delaying.
Brian, before you go any further, a COLA increase is different from a merit increase, correct?
Yes. In this budget, the salary and wages will be increasing over $3 million. So we're not talking about the merit raises and the other raises and are not affected in this budget. They are based upon the contractual, and just wages and salary increases are over 3 million.
Okay, so if we were to not allow the COLA increase for this next year's budget, it doesn't impact other raises that employees may get, correct?
No, not at all. And my understanding, and Chris can answer if I misstate it, is that challenge of $2.3 million in savings to budget may come back in a different form of a concession, not necessarily COLA. But Chris, do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I do, Brian. So no, it is a little bit different than what was just described. This would be
Okay.
Specifically related to a cost of living adjustment and holding that flat without an adjustment for one fiscal year. I can tell you when I met with the bargaining agents, there was some question as to the thing I think you're going to talk about next, which is FRS, and whether or not there would be concessions that we would be interested in other than the delay of FRS for a year. But the COLA is specific to the COLA. And
okay. Thank you for clarifying.
I'll go ahead and let you continue, but then we can talk about the change in recommendation on the FRS.
Okay, so in the last time that we met in June, the city manager had proposed to BAB and the commission a possibility of delaying the implementation of the FRS, which would be a savings of about $700,000. We had a lot of discussion with that in BAB. One of the BAB members felt that should stay on the table as a elimination or a delay. And what we discussed, and through the discussion, I now have a better understanding as to where that $700,000, how that plays out. So I just wanted to share that with you as a commission. We are now looking at a budget of not delaying the implementation of that. And what that is currently the employees that are part of the 401k that would possibly be moving over to the FRS are getting a match of 9% as a minimum. That would move to a minimum of a 10% contribution. The contributions vary based upon the different class levels of the benchmarks of the different groups. Also adding into FRS would be part-timers. That's not an option, and part-timers would have a 10%. The other group that would be going into FRS for the first time would be the elected class, which would be the new commission that will be elected in November, and that class would have a 47% match. So of the 700,000, the commission would be about 170,000 of that 700, and the balance would be the delta between the current employees shifting up from 9 to 10, or the addition of the part-time to the program. So at this point, it looks like, and Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, that we will be looking at not delaying that implementation is what I understand. Chris?
We anticipate at this point moving forward to a January 1st implementation. So be clear there that if we're expecting October 1st, there will be a slight delay to January 1st as we get the right resolutions in place and get the ball rolling. But I do not anticipate a delay into a future fiscal year.
Okay, did anyone have any questions about the FRS implementation?
Yes. Chris, I have a question, Chris, because at our last meeting, basically you spoke about not going forward with that. So if you could just explain to everyone, including the public, why the turnaround?
Right. So it was something that initially was thought to be one of those things that we haven't enjoyed the benefit of yet. So it was one of the things that would make an easy an easy item to push off for a fiscal year as we watch the finances, watch the percent contribution, and it was one of those ways that we could potentially save these additional funds by not having additional entrants into the plan, as well as a fairly sizable contribution for the elected class. obviously I met with the bargaining agents over the summer, and while the commission was out, and recognized that this was something that was very important to them. It was negotiated in the last and most recent contract we have approved with them. And so there's certain things that you push and hold firm on, and certain things that you recognize that you need to negotiate and look for other opportunities as ways to save money. Frankly, they were of the opinion that they would support one-time reductions in either the form of furloughs or other type of money-saving measures over the delay of implementation of the FRS. And so we worked to a place of agreeing to at least bring it back as a recommendation. Our Office of Management and Budget made several recommendations as to how funding could be in place to allow for it. And that's been the change that's occurred over the summer. Was just meeting with the bargaining agents and realizing how big of a deal it was to the contracts that were adopted.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. The next item that I wanted to discuss is when we last met, we were doing projections based upon what we thought revenues were going to be. And the mayor had asked whether or not we felt that the county number was the number. That number came in at the number that was projected into revenue. However, the state revenue, which is our share of collections made by the state that then get appropriated back to us, has come in at $2.8 million short of what it was the last time that we met. So it's just indicating to all of us that the COVID issues that are happening are continuing to move further down the road. And I think that funding from the state, et cetera, is going to continue to be an issue over the next, as the economy in Florida is being impacted adversely by COVID. So that $2.8 million that is impacting the general fund, how we are going to cover that. There was the refinancing of the pension obligation bonds, and that was done at a very advantageous rate, at a rate much better than what we had originally put into the 2021 budget. So that nets around $3 million more from that obligation bond refinancing. And so we're offsetting that shortfall in state revenues of 2.8 through that beneficial refinance. So that then one Peter to pay Paul, but that's why we are not having as a dramatic impact in the 2021 general fund from this missed initial revenue projection from the state. Does anyone have any questions for staff or anyone in regards to that state redo of their number of revenue? Okay, then we're going to move on to the next thing. Not-for-profits. We've had a lot of conversation about not-for-profits, and it's very interesting when my peers voted me in as budget chair 2 years ago. I went ahead and looked back at minutes and notes from the previous 3 to 4 years, watched some of the videos, et cetera, to get a better understanding as to where we have moved as a city, since we are a new commission in essence and a new BAB. So when you're looking at where we were in 2016, we were spending about $750,000 a year on nonprofits. And in 2017, 695, 2018, 770. And then in 2018, we jumped to 2 million. 2020, we did 2.2. And now in the next year, we are putting into the budget 2.2 again. So that 2.2 may sound like a lot, but it's only 1/2 of 1% of the general fund. But the fact that we really haven't had a, what I would call a transparent process for a sort of awarding or making the determinations as to where this nonprofit money would be is something that BAB is looking to be a greater part of. And next month in September, when we meet, since our work for the 2021 budget will be done, we're going to try to think about other cities and other best practices and what should we be doing as a city to be able to get out the word to other nonprofits, et cetera, as to how should this process be playing out. So I really wanted to just pick everyone's brain today, since we're partnering. Do you think that that's something that we should be moving forward with? Any ideas? We won't be making those decisions today, but I just wanted to open it up in this forum to discuss, you know, what are your thoughts about this, you know, nonprofit, and how we could better make sure that everyone feels good about who's being awarded and how much and when. Anyone?
Can I ask you a question, Brian?
Yes.
This contribution to nonprofits, does that include the capital expenditures for which we have pledged for, like Parker Playhouse or Broward Center or anything like that? Or are these operations that we have agreed to participate in?
Staff will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is strictly operations. It's not any CIP projects.
Typically, it's our participation agreements that we have with Stranahan House, for example, United Way, the Nova Art Museum, those partnerships that we have.
Okay. All right. Anyone have any questions?
Brian, I'm with you. This is Ben. I think, you know, I don't know the best way to do it, but having a clear, transparent way where folks can you know, apply for funding or support. And then I think also thinking about us as a city, what amount budgetarily are we interested in, you know, generally and considering for that. So yeah, I'd say the more you can look at best practices or other cities, what they do, how they do it, the better. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. I think what Brian is alluding to is a couple of things. First, can we afford to do that this year, considering some unexpected expenses that we've had, such as homelessness, increased homelessness, such as decrease in income. For, you know, we give $500,000 a year to the NSU Art Museum. Is that something we can continue to afford? I think those are the questions that Brian is asking us, number one. And number two, should we set up a committee that would solicit the nonprofits opportunities that the city does give to nonprofits, and to open it up to those that might need assistance in future years, rather than to just keep it based on the same people every year that we give money to, and to have a review process going forward as to merit and as to viability of the application. Am I getting you? Am I understanding you correctly, Brian?
Yes, I think that this late in the game, we have in the budget, we have put into it the 2.1 million. And I think that a lot of these nonprofits, this is a big number for them, whatever the amount is. So even if it's a small amount to us, but for example, to the Early Learning Coalition of Broward County, $41,000, I'm assuming would be very impactful for them if we eliminate it completely. What I'm saying is, for the future years, I would like to set up something that could be maybe a subcommittee of BAB, et cetera, so that we're looking at what should be the target number that works into the budget as our budget ebbs and tides, and, you know, is more of a percent. So if we're in a real tough budget, which I think we're going to be in 2022, maybe we can't have a $2.2 million bucket, and we need to identify what the total bucket is at the beginning. And then, to your point, it needs to be more publicized. And I think there's other nonprofits out there that had no idea that the city of Fort Lauderdale is writing checks to some nonprofits. And how do we bring that out into the open instead of this is what we do every year, and maybe set up some criteria? And community input, some open forums, et cetera. And we're willing as BAB in our down months, which are basically fall because the new budget's already ramping up. We think that we could help contribute to this process. So
Any
I'm asking
questions?
if anyone thinks this is a good idea, not, et cetera.
Good idea.
Mayor, I do, and Brian, thank you. I do like this. I'm thinking in my mind, do we have any commitments out there that are like a 5-year commitment where we've told a nonprofit, or are all of our commitments annual? Do you know that answer?
Just started 2 years ago. So that was $500,000 and it traditionally had not been. So that was one of the big new gives. And some of the others have been pretty much steady along, but I don't think the public, I mean, I didn't know as an incoming BAB member that the city was doing these kind of numbers and whatever. So I think of all of you as being much more transparent, that I think this is just the next step. And we need to make sure that the citizens of the city realize where their money's going and be more actively part of it, of the award process. So we'll pursue that if it sounds like we've got enough support to start moving in that direction.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Keep going, Brian.
Okay. The next thing that was discussed in the various BAB meetings was also, you know, the wish lists that were done by different department heads. And we were pleased that the city manager recognized that some of the tools for employees are very critical to our city's success and are funded in this new budget. For example, the TASER program. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Does someone need to mute? I can't hardly hear. That the additional compliant uniforms for the fire department, that is in there. The additional shot spotter program is into the budget as well. And the additional $1 million for street lighting, I think for the citizens of the city have been asking for that for years. That new addition in the budget I wanted to highlight. There was also a discussion one of the BAB members brought up in regards at the last meeting and asked the fire chief in regards to the 14 positions that she had put in her wish list request. It was discussed, and I just want to acknowledge that that was discussed, but at this point, the city manager and rest of BAB didn't feel as if those are, that request, that wish list request is going to have a negative impact on the city. I think that going forward as BAB, we will be asking the fire rescue to reevaluate all of the additional personnel that have been added over the years, going to a 3-man truck, et cetera. It really hasn't given us the return on improvement in times that was told to BAB when we funded that. So I think that that's a whole discussion. Along with, we're going to have to be looking at additional staffing for substation. This coming budget has the part of the purchase and moving forward with the substation south of the river. I know that there are neighborhoods in the north of the river along the aisles that have been very surprised as to the response rate, and we need to be looking for that down the future. But in this new budget, we do have moving forward with the idea, and we probably need in 2022 to add staffing to that substation once the land is procured and is built. So I just wanted to give you an update budget-wise in regards to that.
What's that, Brian? What's a shot spotter?
Shot spotter, I'll let is the new chief on? I think it's a great new technology. We were very psyched about it. Is the police chief on, or someone from police that want to field that question so that
We approved that at our last commission meeting.
I just want to know what a shot spotter is.
It basically
it's a
tracks.
technology.
I can explain that to you if you want.
Go ahead.
Welcome, chief. Real
Hi,
quick.
how are you?
Gunshots.
All right, so basically what it is it tracks gunshots in the city. So there's acoustical sensors put up all over the city. We have a 4 square mile area, and the parameters are from Brower Boulevard north to the city limits and Andrews Avenue west to the city limits. And what happens when somebody fires a gun in the city, it bounces off of all these acoustical sensors and it sends the data to a clearinghouse where they verify that it's actually gunshots. That information then gets sent directly to the laptop computers in the police cars within 60 seconds. It gives them exactly where the gunshot took place. It tells them, is it one gun, 2 guns? Is it multiple gunshots? Is it an AK-47? They can actually listen to the gunfire on the computer. It sends them to a location, and within 25 meters is where we will either find somebody who's been shot or evidence of a shooting. So when we've discussed it with other agencies who have it, they've actually gone there and found people laying on the ground shot, revived them, sent them to the hospital and saved lives. Because we really wouldn't have known that somebody was there, because now when we get a call in, it's just, hey, I think I heard shots fired, and where? In a 5-block radius, where are you gonna look? So this takes us directly to the point of where those gunshots were fired from.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You can proceed, Brian.
Okay, so okay, the next thing on the for the general fund, you know, COVID has really changed the general fund and all of our funds and the way that we're all doing business. And as a taxpayer and as a resident of the city, I think that the city, now that we've had our doors closed and we aren't having, you know, live face-to-face meetings, et cetera, that the city has done a good job of trying to pivot and create these Zoom meetings, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the city has an opportunity to start to enhance their communication with the community, acknowledging that things are going to be different going forward. I think our television platform, our communication with the city, et cetera, needs an infrastructure update. As we've been doing more of our technology infrastructure challenges, and when we met with the departments, IT, we were really interested in what they were doing to catch up, because, you know, the public thinks of infrastructure only as the water and sewer, because that makes it in the news as to the breaks. Well, the city has a lot of infrastructure. We have CIP projects in almost all of our funds. And I think that one of my messages needs to be to you as commissioners is that we can't lose focus of our CIP projects. You know, the things like the street lighting, our information platforms, et cetera, need to be continuing to move forward as we're moving forward with our water, sewer, and now our new stormwater. So, Chris, do you have any ideas or comments in regards to that? I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think you're on the right track there. And you know, I've talked, and I know many of you aren't at City Hall today, but you could tell over the summer we put in a new technology system here in our building. So for the first time ever, you're not seeing dangling microphones hanging from the ceiling, and we're wondering where the sound comes from, and we don't have phones positioned on the table. So I want to say that to our IT folks that have retrofitted and brought our technology current to the building, thank you for that work this summer. I do think there's an opportunity as well to engage more of the public on the television channel that we have, Channel 78, that really can be utilized for more than just meetings when they occur, and then essentially a scrolling PowerPoint with some music that comes with a free license. So I think you're onto something there. I think that we're missing an opportunity maybe to connect a little bit more with the public on those platforms. So certainly of interest, and it's something we'll be working on this fall, not knowing when our world comes back to normal and we start to see each other face to face again.
Great. I just think the city needs to enhance their PR a bit more and offset some of the negativity that may be happening in the press. And I think if we can focus on that and share to the residents more of the positive things that are happening in the city, I think we'll all be mentally better off, at least. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the park bond and fire station bonds. Last night at our District 2, some people were asking, where are those? They didn't see it on their bill. Are those projects moving forward? And just for everyone that's out there listening, and for you commissioners, in case you are asked that question, if you look at the trim notice on the front page, there is first a section called county, and then there is Broward's Public Schools, and then it's municipal. So there is the Fort Lauderdale, and that shows the tax rate of the 4.1193. Right below that is voter approved debt levy. That is where that is. So it doesn't say that it's the police bond. It doesn't say that it's a parks bond, but that is where the number is. That rate actually is slightly less projected this year versus last year, and it depends on what your value of your house did. Mine actually went up, but it still was not as much as what my stormwater fee was. So my stormwater fee is actually more than what my voter debt is of my $20,000+ bill. And so it is there. So it is there, and we're moving forward in awarding the projects, or I believe the design is up on tonight for the police station, and those projects are moving forward. And there's also the money is sitting there for our key park bond items as well. So I just wanted to share with you that is in the budget. It is on the trim notice and where to find it. The next thing I wanted to bring up to everyone sort of dovetails into what I noticed in the city auditor, who is next on the agenda. And that is the fund balances in some of the other funds. So the city manager in March or April, when we all had our joint meeting at the beginning of the shutdown, had talked about what some of the different funds projections were in the revenue collections. He revised that then again in May and June, and as we realized that we weren't reopening as quickly as what we originally had projected. So the one fund that I wanted to talk about was the parking fund. But I wanted to also just talk about when I was appointed on BAB, one of my first questions in the learning curve was, if these various funds, you know, because I didn't realize as a taxpayer, there's a general fund, there's the airport fund, there's the parking fund, there's the parks fund, all of these various funds. I just paid my tax bill. So one of the first things I asked was, I remember asking Laura, was, okay, what if one of these funds isn't able to bring in enough revenue to support itself? What happens? So what happens when a fund is not making its revenue? You can go to the revenues or that fund's reserves and pull from the reserves, because we have reserves. You can, as the previous commission did a lot, you can eliminate your CIP programs and keep kicking the can down the road and moving it into perpetuity, or you can start cutting services. Or if all of those have been done, you can go and ask the general fund to make up the shortfall, which then goes to the taxpayers, because the general fund is where our tax dollars are funneled into. Our tax dollars do not go into the parking fund, the water fund, the airport fund. So we put it into that. So in spring, the parking fund was facing a big deficit of over 1.3 million. As we didn't reopen, that deficit came to over $3 million. And that was before we went to the new user rates. What did we do to make that balance for this fiscal year, which ends at the end of September? We kicked $1.5 million of projects into future, and we did other cost savings and other expense reductions to make up for the another $1.5 million. And that's based upon what we think we would do in August revenues and September revenues. And those may not come to fruition, because our track record, as the auditor pointed out, we don't have a real comfort level as to whether or not when all that parking is going to come back. And that was one of his points for the next fiscal year, is whether or not the parking revenue will be sufficient for the parking fund. So when you were all getting ready to talk about the new parking fees and looking at the adjustments that staff had recommended, which were based upon other coastal cities, you voted to start in July with an increased rate for non-residents, non-taxpayers of Fort Lauderdale, and giving the citizens of Fort Lauderdale a reduced rate. There were some hiccups in starting to implement that with technology for some of the owners in Fort Lauderdale to get that rate in. A lot of those kinks have been moved out. I heard from a lot of businesses concerns about the fact that their employees used public parking because they didn't have spaces for them, and that the rate would be detrimental to working people that have to come and work at a bar or restaurant and are paying for public parking. So that's been adjusted to $10 if you can show that you are using public, that's a max per day, whether you live in the city or not. So if you're a server or a waiter or a cook and you are working in Fort Lauderdale and you need to park in parking services owned by the city, the max is $10. But now I've been hearing a lot of conversation in regards to people that don't live in the city that are upset that the city has implemented this new parking and are asking for a reduction in parking for non-residents. My concern with that is if the parking fund continues not to meet its revenue projections, are we going to continue to not do repairs to our parking services? Are we not going to be implementing new meter technology? Are we going to not be cleaning our parking facilities? Are we not going to be lighting, et cetera? Or are we going to then ask the citizens of Fort Lauderdale to add to the general fund money and pull general fund money to pay for the shortfall in parking revenues to give non-residents a parking break? And that's the question that I wanted to pose.
All right, so Brian, it's an important issue you brought up because I've got stacks of emails from people who, are very upset that we raised the hourly rate. And so, Chris, can you respond to that? Would we be shortchanging our services if we went back to $2 an hour instead of $4 an hour? Can you give us a response?
Yeah, so let me get Ben Rogers, who's our Transportation and Mobility Director. Ben, there he is on video. We'll get him off of mute. He can give you some sense as to where that fund is, where the service level is, and what a temporary reduction of parking rate would equal in the form of performance. Ben, are you there?
Yes, Chris, I'm here. Good morning, afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Ben Rogers, Transportation and Mobility. Yes, Mayor, we've heard a lot from the businesses. We've worked with a lot of the local businesses on their concerns as well. Short term, as Brian indicated, it's very hard to predict. The volumes have kind of gone up and down based off of the COVID experience. And as we open and shut down, it continues to fluctuate. So we try to put a best guess for the end of this year. If we would go through the end of this fiscal year and reduce the rate down to like a $2 rate for the remaining 6 weeks, it would generate somewhere around $1 million in shortfall. And as Brian indicated, so far to date, we've been able to balance by capital projects and some vacancy savings and things of that nature. But moving forward, we either have to eliminate some rather large projects or make some staffing level changes or operational changes within the department.
6 weeks or 6 months?
6 weeks.
And that's where the concern is if we look at just this fiscal year, that $1 million number, and once again, that $1 million number is no certain number. That's just a best guess based off of July activity. That would generate $1 million for the next 6 weeks. So if we're looking at a long-term solution, it would be very impactful on the fund.
Anyone have any questions of Ben? Well, I think we need to do something. Chris, what do you think we might
Mayor?
be able to do? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you. Ben, how do we stack up with our neighboring cities, especially the coastal cities, in terms of our rates?
Yeah, so part of our rate presentation back in May was that some of the major coastal areas have higher rates than what we did at the time. And we looked at Miami and partnered or kind of shadowed what they did with the non-resident rate to try to impact the revenues, but not the residents. So we're very in alignment with a lot of our neighboring cities.
The new rates are very in line.
Yes, it's very difficult to say apples to apples. There's a lot of oranges in there when you compare rates because of the vicinity to businesses, vicinity to facilities, facilities to downtown, things of that nature. But from a global perspective, we're not the highest in South Florida.
And would you say that we've been getting a good response from the residents of Fort Lauderdale in terms of the program that we initiated for the parking program?
Yeah, I think when we rolled it out, we did have some hiccups with onboarding and getting the discounted rates out there. We changed our process in mid-July. I think that we've had pretty good feedback from the residents, but some challenges from the businesses.
Okay, and I understand that. We had a good thorough discussion about this at my district pre-agenda meeting last night. There did not seem to be an appetite to change and roll back the rates. People seem to feel that the residents did deserve the discount. They understood that we've gone some extra measures in terms of the $10 maximum now because of the COVID situation, which applies to everyone, correct me if I'm wrong, resident, non-resident. And also the fact that we've done incremental parking. You don't have to spend the entire hour's worth of money. You can actually now just park for 15 minutes, correct, or a half an hour, and not have to pay that full $4 if you don't live in the city or you don't have any kind of a parking permit, correct?
That's correct. We went to an incremental based on the zone. Depends on if you get 15 or 20 minutes as a minimum time purchase. And for the $10 max rate, that is applicable to all parking meters, pay stations, citywide, regardless of residency.
Yeah, and I've been struggling with this because I understand that, if folks are unhappy with the businesses and parking, that's a concern, but I'm trying to be fact-based about this. And I'm not sure whether it's just the general COVID-19 situation right now that's hurting the restaurants or the parking. I'm tending to believe that it's just the general situation that we're in with COVID-19, because I've also seen restaurants that have gone out of business where they have free parking. So it's hard for me to sometimes equate the two together. So it's a tough call, but thanks for the data.
Well, so, a lot of your district covers areas that are impacted by the increase in parking, as well as District 4.
And Mayor, let me just tell you, this weekend, as an example, you could not find a space anywhere on the beach. It was packed. A1A, all of the spaces are taken. It doesn't seem to be influencing folks in terms of parking. But maybe you can, elaborate on that, Ben. But I've seen when the weather's nice and the weekends are great, and I've seen just totally full parking. How has that looked the last couple of weeks to you?
Yeah, citywide, from March to July, we're down about 56% of transactions year over year. But to your point, Vice Mayor, the areas of town depend on the demand. I think the Barrier Island's been pretty busy, especially over the last couple of weeks. But a lot of our impact has been, the beach was closed for a 2-month period where we closed parking down. We've been doing special initiatives like Las Olas parking lane closure on the weekends to try to promote outdoor activity. Things of those natures that have impacted us in totality. And also special events. If you think about special events, they all have parking, and we haven't had any of those major events like Tortuga or the air show over the last 6 months.
Dan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think from a staff perspective, we still need to dig into this.
I meant Commissioner Sorensen. I'm sorry. Commissioner Sorensen.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Sorensen, do you have any thoughts on this?
Thanks. Yeah, so I think if we did have a significant reduction, I'm concerned about the funding for, our projects. So I guess the thing that's coming to my mind is if we did a partial reduction, if we went to, for example, $3, then I'm assuming Ben Rogers, that's like, we're looking at a $500,000 deficit.
Yeah, I'd have to run the numbers. Once again, as I said earlier, we're trying to use July activity as the baseline, but it's really hard to project this at this time with all the volume ebb and flows.
And Ben,
Yeah.
and Ben Rogers, can I ask a question on that? I heard a lot of my neighbors, because of the fact that it's we had hiccups in going in, that some of them had been paying the $4, but now that they have their reduced rate, we have a risk of more city people signing up. And where you think that that's being used by non-city members, we may have a reduction in revenue just because of the education of people realizing that they don't have to pay $4 if they live in the city and they're signing up. Because you haven't signed up, the sign up has been growing. So we may have even a more of a revenue risk as more people sign up that live in the city.
Yeah, so for a short-term perspective, that's accurate. For a long-term, when we did our forecasting, our modeling, we put in a certain percentage of residents adopting to the new rate structure, and we haven't hit that threshold yet. But short-term, absolutely.
Okay.
Do you want to chime in on this?
I don't really have anything to add beyond what Ben has presented. Obviously,
I do,
it's a
Mayor.
reduction that there's the revenue hit that's at risk. If the commission wants to try something for 6 weeks, we could certainly, we're here to react to whatever.
All right. Well, the thing is, Ben, in transportation, you're using July as the basis upon which you're making your projections. And the thing is that we closed the beaches on July 4th weekend, and a lot of businesses were not operational during the month of July. It's the middle of the summer where we traditionally don't have a lot of activity. I'm not sure it's a fair analysis to use that as a sole basis upon which to make projections. I personally think that we should try to make some accommodation to the business community because I think that this is negatively impacting visitors. I mean, let's face it, Fort Lauderdale could not exist without visitors. And if we have reduced parking for our own folks, that's great. But the ones that keep us in business, that go to the restaurants, that attend whatever events there are people that come from outside the city. And so what we're doing is creating a disincentive. A person wants to come and have dinner and spend 2 hours or 2.5 hours, there's another $12 added onto their bill. Whereas if they try to find a place in a mall in Plantation, there's free parking. So I don't know. I just feel that we should make some type of consideration. Maybe we could do it on a temporary basis, maybe for 6 months, and see how that works out. If it turns out to be unsustainable, then we can revert back. Does anybody else on the commission have any thoughts about that?
I do, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Heather.
Can you hear me all? Can you hear me okay now? I switched rooms and audio. Is
The
it
little
clear?
low, the volume's low.
The volume's low?
Okay, we
That's
can
a
hear
little
you.
better.
Okay, maybe I need to sit closer. You don't want to see me that close. Gosh, I gotta sit back. Okay, thank you. I hear what you're saying, Mayor, about temporary, but I'm kind of concerned right now about next year's budget. Ben Rogers, help me with some numbers. Are we anticipating 22 million coming into the parking fund next year?
I don't think it's quite that much. I have to refer to Laura on the latest projection, but I think it's somewhere right around 21, I thought.
Okay, so maybe next year's projected budget is around 21, and this year we came in at about 13 million so far.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I believe there's
Go ahead,
no. So that's
yeah,
a pretty. Well, go ahead.
So next year, our revenue budget is 25.4 million.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
25.4 million for fiscal year 21. That's assuming a full year of the new rates without a reduction in volume.
Okay, and then currently this year, Laura, what is our current revenue to date based on August or whatever, or what is our projection, for this fiscal year?
Actually, this is John Herbst. Let me weigh in on that because I'm looking at our numbers right now. So I think, Commissioner, what you're really focused on are the charges for services, because the number that Laura gave you also included fines and forfeitures. So I think if we just look at the charges for services, next year's proposed budget is 21.7 million. This year's fiscal year estimate is 13.5 million. So there's a swing of $7 million over the current year estimate. So I think we want to leave out the fines and forfeiture component and just focus on the charges from the meters. I think that's what you're looking at, right?
Those are also coming in low.
Okay. So thank you for giving me those two numbers. That's really my concern today when I'm thinking about moving forward with our proposed budget, our hourly rate. And I do feel for the businesses that are suffering right now. I mean, it's happening all over our city, really, no matter what your business is and no matter what your parking situation is. I do think we've worked with our businesses to give them a fair employee rate. That was a good concession, Ben, or a good plan that you came up with for the businesses. My concern probably weighs more towards the residents. I hear water bills every day, so our residents are being charged more and more and more every year. I mean, my husband opened the trim notice and he asked me what I did. I mean, when we saw that. So we have stormwater on our tax bill. We have our utilities going up each year. We just had Brian remind us we could have a 9% increase, in a year again for our utilities. So I'm not in favor of reducing the rate for our visitors. I appreciate the fact that they're coming. I am in favor of keeping the rate the same for our residents, which is what we did when we had this policy conversation a couple months ago. And, if we are in line with other coastal cities, as Ben Rogers pointed out, the amount we charge our guests is in line, and the incremental charges that Steve brought up. Like I said, we've had this conversation already, and I still feel pretty good about the decision I made then to, go up. I want to maintain our buildings. I don't want another, War Memorial, Lockhart, all that stuff that we've all worked so hard as a commission to improve, tear down, fix, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we can't go back to that. And I don't want our parking fund to take a $7 million hit. And I'm definitely not transferring money out of our general fund to our parking fund, because that's taxpayers paying for, subsidizing our guests. It's a tricky situation, but that's how I feel.
Okay, all right, great. Anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, so I guess I'm listening to the majority, and the majority seems to think to leave things as they are. So let's move on, Brian.
Okay. At that point, I was just going to open it up because I was trying to make sure we kept on to time. I'm about to turn it over to the auditor, but I just wanted to open it back up to the mayor and all the commissioners. If you had anything that you felt that were concerns on the new budget that I did not bring up today, open up for input.
Anybody have any questions of Brian in general with regard to the budget? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
My only question would be, Brian, I know you discussed 5-ash. Are we, and I know you're talking about 65 million repairs for next year. When are we as a commission going to make a decision to start moving forward with this project?
Chris, do you want to respond?
I can. Oh, good. Sorry, I unmuted on the computer by habit, and I didn't realize I was also in the same room. How about that? In the Zoom world we live. So we have it based upon revenue sufficiency at this point. We have in the next fiscal year the intent to move forward with an owner's representative, and based upon the water rates, would then start to build the dollars to be able to issue bonds over 3 consecutive fiscal years, and that would put us into where we would begin 5-ash construction in 2025. We believe that's with a 9% that Brian brought up. As we modeled the revenue sufficiency in the water fund, it was one of those things where we could continue and have, that 1 year of a really significant rate increase to be able to issue the debt for a new water plant, or we could smooth that in over time. And I think our recommendation to the commission will be to smooth it in over time, and that's what gets us to that 9% number. But Commissioner, in answer to your question, we're ready to start now with the bringing somebody on board to start the design. And if you all approve this budget, we'll do that beginning October 1st, and then we'll start to build the funds in the following fiscal year.
So, but let me further add to that. So, Commissioner, you have been meeting with proponents who have come to the city to make recommendations to do a design build operation? Have you been meeting with any of those folks yet?
I have.
You have. So, so that timeline of 5 years just to begin construction sounds pretty remote. And if the commission decides to adopt an unsolicited proposal by any one or more of these proponents, that timeline will be shortened significantly. And it would be like 2 or 3 years instead of 5 to 7 years. So, so I just wanted to add to what the city manager is saying, because based on the decision that we're going to make. So the next question would be, when are we going to make that decision? And Chris, when are you going to bring anything forward to the commission so we can make a decision one way or the other how we're going to approach this?
Well, we've obviously had phone calls and discussions with people that have interest in submitting an unsolicited proposal. It's hard to solicit an unsolicited proposal, so they really just kind of have to wait till it's to that point that it shows up and is ready for discussion. On a parallel path, I think I need to keep us on track that just for whatever reason, if no unsolicited proposal shows up, we still need a new water plant.
We'll still need to fund it either way. So you're right.
Correct.
Right. But based on conversations that I've had with some of these folks, I think proposals are imminent to be presented.
I think so. I think you're right.
And then once a proposal is submitted and we accept the proposal, then what is it? How many days do we have to wait for other proposals to come forward?
21 to 120.
Up to 120 days to, just like with Lockhart Stadium, Commissioner, we have between 20 to 120 days to make it decide how open that window should be for other proponents to come forward. So it could be a pretty aggressive timeline, and I think that's what we're looking for. Some of the folks that have come to us have even said that they can reduce the cost of water by 25 to 30% than what it is today. I'd like to see it to believe it, but I know. But so that's what we're looking at. So as soon as an unsolicited proposal comes to us, that's when the clock begins. Otherwise, the city manager is going to be working on a parallel path to try to work on rebuilding the plant based on what he just described earlier.
Okay, just for clarification, so the parallel path, when we vote on this budget in September, the parallel path does have a staff member on board to start kind of analyzing what we're going to do with the project, basically.
Probably a very high-level engineering consulting firm that has built the water plant before they can represent our interests in the building of ours.
Right, and we have some people on staff already who have a background in building plants. So that's a good thing. I believe Omar he's also had a background in building.
A couple overseas.
Yeah, so he's comes to us with a tremendous amount of experience and talent in that regard. So I think we're well positioned to move forward aggressively on this because we really need to do it. I mean, in 2016, the Reese report said that our plant was on the verge of calamitous failure, and here we are 4 years later. So, yes, Chris.
So the one thing I just want to bring up, and we don't have to discuss it today, but I will want to discuss it with the commissioners individually, is your thought process on this whole notion of design, build, operate, maintain. That's a very different path forward than design, build, because operate, maintain would suggest that we can take our water utility and transfer it for a period of time into the private sector. That's really significant to decision to make.
I think that discussion should be at our next conference meeting, if you can make that
Sure.
an agenda item. I think that we need to have a robust discussion regarding that. And I think that gives the commission enough time to go out into the community and ask questions and hear responses and to do a little self-educating, as I will too, to see, how the city commission feels it should approach this new plan. Should we take a turnkey plant and let somebody else run it for 20, 25 years, 30 years? Or should we let them design, build it, and then we operate it? So I think that in the next conference meeting, we should have that discussion.
So I'll do that, and I'm looking at the city auditor to participate in the preparation of that agenda item along with me. John, are you willing to do that?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Can you all hear the city manager when he speaks?
Yes.
Okay, because he's speaking.
Use the microphone now.
I know, he's speaking very softly, and it's amazing, and I'm amazed at how it can pick up voices that easily.
New technology. Wow.
Yes. I can't whisper in people's ears.
The hot mic.
It's the hot mic. Okay, any other questions of Brian?
Okay, before I turn it over to our city auditor, who's up next, I just want to thank all of you in your discussion today. I'm really psyched that I'm hearing you be proactive again and moving aggressively toward the new 5 ash. It very scares me as a member of the community to know that, as the mayor just pointed out, a 2016 study said it's almost ready. And to have a timeline of possibly 5 more years just scares me. So thank you for all of your input, your support. I want to thank all the BAB members. I know that tonight there's 10 people being on the commission as being reappointed, 9 existing and 1 new face we will welcome in September. I want to also thank the city manager and the budget director, Laura Reese, and all the department heads for being very open and being great partners with BAB over the past year as we've helped put this budget together. So kudos to everyone. And with that, I would like to turn it over to John Herbst, our city auditor.
Okay, John, before you begin, I want to echo those sentiments from the commission. On behalf of the commission, we thank you and every member of the advisory board for the endless amount of hours and of research and discussion that have gone into this. This was clearly a labor of love on all of your parts. To do this on a voluntary basis has been a tremendous asset to the city, and I know that this commission appreciates all the work that you folks do to help the city staff move these issues along. And so we thank you again and again for the work that you've done. So we appreciate it, Brian.
Yes, thank you all.
John, do you want, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, and to the Budget Advisory Board Chair, Brian, appreciate it. You will all have received by this point and had a chance to review the memorandum that we sent out last week. I've also had a conversation with the city manager and his staff regarding some of the items that we've got in here. We're in agreement on some, not in agreement on some other ones, as can be expected. I think the primary thing to note, as Brian pointed out earlier, is that we've had a number of changes since the original budget was presented by the city manager in July. And to use the most overused term lately is unprecedented. So I think the number of changes that our budget staff has had to deal with in trying to put together this proposed budget has just been extraordinary. They're basically, trying to drive while looking in the rear view mirror, which normally is acceptable, but right now is virtually impossible. And so as you saw, we've had a number of changes since that, the primary one being the reduction in the state shared revenues, which was discussed briefly before. And so we're looking at, and I like to use round numbers, it keeps it simple for everybody. So we're looking at roughly 3 million less in revenue from the state coming in. The good thing is, as also was mentioned, is the pension obligation bonds came in significantly better, affording us, I think, ample opportunity to offset that reduction in the state shared revenues. Now, just as a matter of format, I don't know if you want me to walk through all of these and then give the city manager a chance to respond individually, or should we do this one by one? It's your call, Mayor.
Well, we're kind of limited in time, so what do you feel can be accomplished in the next 15 minutes?
If we go one
Well,
by one.
let me take it this way. I think perhaps.
Let's go one
Sure,
by one.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris, then I'll let you address that.
Yeah, so you've really given the answer. I'll just, so for the purposes of affirming that answer of how we intend on closing that gap, let me turn it over to Laura Reese so she can weigh in on number one.
Sure, thank you, Mayor and Commission and John. So the state revenue estimate came in after our due date for the proposed budget. So the economists were still working on those projections. So we received those in late July, and that $2.8 million number is what we typically use because they have the best information. So we were going to offset the reduction in shared gas tax, offset sales tax, CST, and those other revenues by using the savings that we were able to realize due to the low interest rates, due to the economy and our great bond rating.
Okay,
Thank you, Laura. The second item, and this is more a matter of information for the commission. There is some additional savings resulting from that reduction in interest rates for the pension obligation bond. And the manager and staff are proposing that we leave those funds in the debt reserve fund next year, knowing that we're going to be facing some challenges going forward as well. And I concur with that from a perspective of conservative budgeting. I'm always in favor of keeping your powder dry, as they say, but we wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that. So this is, again, this is a matter of transparency from our perspective. It's a policy for the commission to decide whether to leave those extra dollars in the debt service fund or perhaps use them to offset some other potential cost increases, or if there are other policy initiatives that the commission wants to undertake.
Any comments from the commission?
I can let Susan Grant respond if you want a response from the management perspective. This was her creation as a way to balance some of our debt out over a couple of years. Susan?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Mayor and Chair Donaldson. As everyone's mentioned, yeah, the bonds that we closed on earlier this month, the interest rate was 1.5. We were anticipating one amount of savings, and over the next 12 years, we'll be generating 17.8 million in savings. The way the bonds were structured in this first fiscal year, they were interest-only payments. So the debt service for fiscal 21 is 24.2 million. And then that goes up in the second year. So the objective of budgeting and funding the amount in the debt service fund was to create a level debt service over the course of the next 12 years, which is the life of those bonds. That's it. And if anyone has any questions.
I do. So if it was structured as interest only, wouldn't it behoove us to start paying down principal?
Well, and there is principal as well, because keep in mind it was an advanced refunding. So there's 3 years worth of principal that are also included in that debt service. So we will be paying down principal over the next 3 years and then start that with the refunding after that.
So how much does the savings generate should we decide to push it over into the general fund?
So in fiscal year 21, it's 3.9 million. And then that goes down in subsequent years. But again, the biggest concern was if we took all of that savings in fiscal 21, we'd have to deal with the additional amount of 2.5 million in fiscal 22. And again, you know, that year, we have no idea what the situation will be as far as assessed values. So it was being very conservative, as John said, and just planning for the future and ensuring level debt service over the course of the next 12 years.
Does anyone from the commission have any recommendation? Should we keep it in the fund so that it can, as a rainy day fund, to make sure that we cover shortfalls in the next year or two? Or do you want to tap into it to help cover some of the shortfalls we're having in the next fiscal year?
I have a question, Mayor.
Sure.
John, can you help me understand if we should do what the mayor's recommending or with this item?
So my recommendation is I do concur with the city manager and with Susan's approach. I'm always have been in favor of being conservative. I only bring it to your attention again because it's a policy decision from my perspective. So that's something that needs to come back, to the commission to weigh in on. But I do think it's prudent. I do think it makes good financial sense. So I would be in favor of it.
Okay, me too. Thank you.
So maybe the approach then, Commissioner, would be let's leave it there for this fiscal year, and then we can re-examine it next fiscal year, if depending upon what our income is. That makes sense to everybody?
I agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks.
Move on, John.
So the next item, again, reflects what was also discussed, that we are currently in negotiations with both the police and fire unions, and we have reopened discussions with Teamsters and Federated. And the budget as currently presented assumes that we have no cost of living increases for any of our bargaining units. While that may work out to be what happens, we're again just bringing to your attention that should at some point you vote to grant COLAs or to retain the COLAs for the agreements already in place, that there is no money in the budget for that. So that will create a hole in the budget at that time. And the reason we do this is because, Mayor, you were around and Commissioner McKenzie several years ago when we negotiated our police and fire agreements, and we didn't budget for them as well. And those extended out a little bit. And then we were kind of caught by surprise because we were several million dollars short in the budget and had to take those out of reserves. So again, this is just a matter of making you aware of the unpredictability of collective bargaining.
Okay.
And I believe the city manager touched a little bit on the FRS issue because it did not include FRS. So that's one that we know may be back on the table. So there are some numbers in flux.
So our response to that is that is all true. And we agree that in order for the budget to be balanced to move forward, we have to have those MOUs in place. I'm confident that there's a higher likelihood that we will than we won't. And let me let Laura weigh in quickly as to how this is in the budget itself so that we can go either of the two directions based upon our continued discussions with the union.
Laura?
Laura, you're still on mute.
Hi, sorry about that. Laura Reese, Budget Director. So similar to what we did last year, John had the same finding because we were negotiating with Teamsters and Federation last fiscal year. When we're in ongoing negotiations, what we'll do is we'll put a negative budget as a placeholder in a general government account. And that really represents a targeted reduction. So what the manager is telling you is we're targeting that $3 million, $700,000 from FRS, and then the $2.3 million for COLA. And so we budget it in Gen. And then what happens is once we actually reach the agreement, we'll load it in all of the appropriate budgets. So between now and the first budget hearing, if the city manager is now going to keep FRS in, we'll remove that negative budget, and then we'll put the appropriate budgets will be in place in the operating budgets. So hopefully that provides a little clarification.
Okay, great. Keep going, John.
Okay, next item. Sure, next item, and this is, again, just bringing something to your attention. So you may recall that we paused our ERP implementation project last year. There were some challenges that we experienced with that, bringing that system online. Since that time, we've had an outside consultant do a after-the-fact analysis to try and figure out where it went off the rails and has made recommendations moving forward. The recommendations involve completing the project and sticking with the software that we currently have and trying to get it where it needs to be. The expectation is hopefully that we'll be starting that soon. We're currently in negotiations with the vendor and waiting for the vendor to come back with a final number. The consultant has put forth their number, their estimate of what they think it might be, and that's the number that's in the budget. So at this point, it's the best estimate that staff has. Our only concern is that it might not be high enough. It's been our experience from folks in my shop who have done system implementations that they always tend to go over budget. And so we're just letting you know that that may be a possibility. Not to say that it will, but just to say that we don't have a high degree of confidence in the number, but we are unable to tell you what that number might be until we actually conclude the negotiations with Infor, the provider. So again, this is just bringing it to your attention.
John.
Yes,
this
sir.
is the issue that this is the one item I had an issue with a couple years ago. Then I revisited last year. Now we initially started off with the purchase of the equipment to the tune of $6 million, right?
That is correct.
What have we expended from that day to now? And we didn't have a clue what it was going to cost us to flip the switch. And then you had a expectation data back in October of last year that I asked about. And then we got an audit from your office saying that we weren't going to meet that threshold. Can you tell me, I know you said you don't have a number, but there's some numbers that have been floating around and there's been some other costs associated with this prior to. We went out and purchased this system knowing that we had to do all these things. And now, 2 years later, we're looking at implementing it for almost the cost that it cost us to purchase the program. So I'm not very happy about this because I think this is a fiscal mistake. Somebody didn't plan properly. And I want you to give me some numbers right now that I can share with the public so that we can see how we're going to meet this, in my opinion, this shortfall of projections.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner. So I don't have an exact figure in front of me, and I apologize for that. I can ask my staff to try and pull one up while we're going over this. But I want to say, in terms of order of magnitude, that we've spent somewhere in the neighborhood of between $5 and $6 million already on this project.
In addition to purchasing it, right?
So no, that's inclusive. So the purchase and the consulting work around the implementation and the installation, that sum total is somewhere, like I said, and please, I'm ballparking this from memory. It's probably $5.5 million. And since that time, since we put it on hold, we've made no additional payments to them, has been my understanding, but we have had to engage this outside consultant, they're called Panorama, to do this, again, after action report, if you will, to try and figure out what went wrong with it. I believe a draft of that report is with the city manager's office right now. I don't know when the final release date for that, but I think it's giving them some indication of what they need to do going forward. And the estimate of the 2.6 million for completion is coming from that report. So, but again, like I said, it's very difficult for us to be able to project how accurate that is because you've got one consultant trying to give you an estimate of what another consultant's costs are going to be. So if that estimate came from the one that's going to finish the work, I would have a higher degree of confidence that the number would be accurate. But you know, it's like asking, you know, Bob over there to tell you how much Jimmy's going to charge you to do the work on your house. So Bob is only going to give you an estimate based on what he would do.
Yeah, but the problem I have with this is that, you know, you and the city manager told me by October this would be in, and it would hit every threshold we needed to. And here we are, October coming in a month and a half. And now we don't have any clue at the cost or where this thing is going to land. And that concerns me because you assured me back then, and I'm not very comfortable with this implementation, or if we even purchase the right system to make this conversion with.
So Commissioner, let me weigh in if I can, and John, let me weigh in real quick. So yeah, to have gone back in time and tried to get in the heads of the people that made the decision as to if this was the right software for us, I'd love to go back and ask some of those questions as to how this was the product that was selected. I'd also love to go back in time to the implementation team that was originally placed and have removed them and switched them out much earlier than I was able to do that. But I can tell you since our last conversation, we've had to put a completely new team in ERP implementation led by Tarlisha and Andrew and Susan Grant in finance. I have a better level of comfort now in saying that we have a team assembled that can actually get this across the finish line. We're going to do it in a phased implementation as opposed to a light switch flip moment. But Commissioner, I share your frustration. I did last year as well. You know, unfortunately, we're dealt the hand that we're dealt, and this is how we're trying to pick up the pieces. So I don't know if you want to hear from Andrew now as to how we think we're going to get across the finish line, or if you want to do that in a different setting. But we're prepared to discuss how we're moving forward from today and how we plan on getting this ERP online.
That'd be up to the mayor if he has time today. I don't want to add to his agenda, but if you want to come back and talk about it. But this is serious because even in your statement just now, you admitted that you had to make some grave changes to get where we are today. But there was a serious miscalculation with this, and that concerns me as a policymaker.
Commissioner, I think you're right, but I do think that requires a lengthier discussion, and we need to wrap things up here shortly so we can move into our conference meeting.
It's up to you, Mayor.
Your point is very well taken, and it's very disturbing, but I have to say that our staff has worked as best they can under the circumstances, and so let's see how we can try to make things better. Do you agree that we should make this an agenda item, Chris, perhaps at a conference meeting?
We can
Is that okay, Commissioner? Can we do that?
And thank you all. Thank you.
Keep going, John.
All right, the next item, I don't think we need to discuss it any further. I think we went through it pretty well, but it's the unknown impact to the parking fund. As we said, there's an impact on the current year. There's an impact on the future year. We don't know when back to normal occurs. And we also don't know really the impact of the increase in rates. For those of you who may not remember Economics 101, we have elasticity of demand, which means when you double the price of something, people tend to use less of it. So projecting out what the revenue is going to be is much more difficult when you don't have a track record, and the increases in the prices don't give us the ability to run, the regression analysis that we normally would based on past history. So we just leave that open. We've already talked about that. I don't want to beat it to death. Next item is, this is something that's going to be coming up, I believe, for your discussion, is the potential cost for the replacement of the Las Olas Marina pump station and sewer pipe. And that's associated with the Suntex Marina redevelopment project. So if and when the commission is satisfied and ready to move forward with that project, then those funds will have to be identified within the CIP plan to be made available to do that work. Currently, those monies are not there in the CIP plan, and they will have to be reprogrammed from other projects.
Well, that item is part of a larger discussion, which we're going to have this afternoon at the conference meeting.
Precisely. And I don't know if Chris wants to add any more to that.
No, I'm going to say it in the next meeting, so we'll just save that discussion for the next meeting when we have the presentation pulled up so the commission can see it.
Very good. The next item just refers to two what I'd call oversights that we uncovered. One had to do with the stormwater fees that we talked about earlier. We used to do them internally. Now they're going to be done by the county as part of the ad valorem bills, and there's some utility billing revenue that was associated with that needs to be removed, as well as a small amount of revenue from the BHMR that we're not anticipating. So that's a minor change that I think we're in agreement on. And then the last two items are information only. I apologize, I cut you off, Chris. I didn't.
Yeah, no, I would like to respond because I think in concept we agree. I just don't think we agree with the number. So I just want to throw that on the record. Let Laura respond quickly to that one and then we'll move on.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we agree in concept, and we're going to be showing the auditor our new calculations and getting aligned before the first public hearing.
Very good. Thank you. The last two items, number 7 and number 8, these are just what I'll call reminders. So we had anticipated, as you probably all recall, getting reimbursed from South Florida Regional Transportation Authority for the money that we turned over to them that was supposed to pay for the north loop of the WAVE project of the CRA. The CRA had issued debt to pay for that, and we had anticipated paying that debt off when we were reimbursed from SFRTA. To this point, we still have not been reimbursed, and so therefore the debt service remains on our books, as does the debt itself. So this is just a reminder that that's there. And then the last item, again, and this goes with the recent settlement for the Durs neighborhood, and it's just a reminder that we're going to need to be doing these ongoing transfers for the next 3 years to replenish that fund. We took a significant hit to it when we funded the settlement out of that fund. So it's just a reminder to you as you look forward that we're going to need to make significant contributions back into the property and casualty fund. Again, it's being handled appropriately, but this is just a reminder to you that this is an item that will be recurring on an annual basis. And my last thing, I just want to make sure everybody sees that I am wearing my T-shirt.
Okay.
I'm along with the vice mayor on that. I got the memo. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Herbst? Okay, there being none, I believe that concludes the workshop. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add before we conclude the workshop?
From a procedure standpoint, are we all staying on the same call if we're just
We're gonna take a 5-minute break. Yeah.
Make sure you go vote. Everybody vote. Today you vote.
Okay. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break between the workshop and our next meeting.
The recording has stopped.
Thank you. I really like this new technology.
Yeah, you can actually hear and see.
You can hear and there's not like things dangling in the mayor's face. And
that was a little weird.
We can drop the mic if you want.
No. I'll never forget the time.
By the way, you're still hot on the mic, folks.
You guys were still broadcasting.